Hello, this video is designed for A-level students who want to build up some confidence getting started with C#. So it'll be an introduction to Visual Studio. I'm assuming that you've downloaded the free version of Visual Studio, so Visual Studio Community Edition 2019, the latest version available at the moment. And I'm assuming that you've got some experience of some Python programming or programming in a different text-based programming language. We're going to start with this program. So let's run it and see what happens. It asks us how many students are in a class. Let's say we've got 13. Let's say we've got 100 books. So we can hand out 7 books per person with 9 left over. Or alternatively, let's see, we've got 20 students in a class with 50 books. That means there's 2 books per student, which makes 40. With 10 left over to get back to 50. So this is making sure that we can convert different data types. We know how to display stuff onto the screen, the equivalent of print in Python. We know how to ask a question, the equivalent of input in Python. And then we're going to use 2 arithmetic operators. We're going to use integer division and the modulo operator. So that's what we're going to convert. So if we make a new project in Visual Studio, the type of projects we're going to use at the beginning are console.NET Framework applications. So let's just search for a console app. You've got a choice of a variety of different frameworks and different languages. We want C# and .NET Framework. So console app, C# .NET Framework, that's the one. Let's give it a name, translate, I'm going to call it. And then you should get some boilerplate, some code that we're going to add to. So these using lines at the top say which libraries, which modules, which built-in stuff to the language we're going to access. All C# programs go in a namespace, which is usually, well, it is the same name as your project that you create. Then we're going to have a class, and inside that class is going to be a static void main. So this is a method that is called at the start of the program. And I'm not going to explain class and static at the moment. All you need to know is that your code, when you run it, goes in here. So that's a little bit more complicated than we're used to with Python. You can just start writing the code, but it's enough to get us going. Okay, I'm going to indent all of this. You can select multiple lines and press Tab in Visual Studio, and we're going to convert each line into a sequence of instructions in C#. Okay. So a comment in Python starts with a hash. A comment in C# starts with a double forward slash, or you can have /star to start a comment, but notice that kind of goes multi-line, so we have to end the comment further down. So I'm going to keep all the Python code out of the comment actually, and let's just try and convert each line at a time. Okay, so in Python, you can just use a variable and you don't have to say what data type is stored in it. In C#, we have to be a little bit more formal. You need to say to the language exactly how much memory you need to allocate for each variable and what data type you're going to store in that variable. So it looks to me like in Python this was going to be an integer. And in Python, it asked a question, enter the number of students, and then it converted it into an integer. In C#, we have to break that down a little bit more. First of all, we have to do the output, console.write, and that's where we can display the prompt to the user and pressing Control X to cut, Control V to paste. Once we've written that to the console, as in displayed it to the screen, print, then we can ask the question. So console.readLine will ask the question, the user will type something in, and then we need to remember the answer. So let's say the number of students is whatever we read from the console. Now if you hover your mouse over any errors, it gives you an overview of what's wrong. We have an error because you can't implicitly convert from a string to an integer. So read line, the user will type in some text. We want to convert that string into an integer and we can't do it implicitly. We've just got to do int.parse and then surround what we want to convert with parentheses, with round brackets, and then that gets converted to an integer, and the integer gets stored in this variable here. Okay, so we're going to do the same here. We want a new variable called number of books. Control delete to get rid of that white space. And then we want to ask a question again. So that's the question we're going to ask. We need to display that to the screen first. Oops. And then once we've displayed it to the screen, we can ask the question with readline. And again, we want to store that value into a variable, and we have to convert it from a string to an integer using int.parse. Okay, then the number of books per student. Now this should only be a whole number. You can't give a student half of a book, so that needs to be an integer. And there's no such thing as a integer division operator. It's just if you have an integer and you do division, then the result is going to be the integer division. So an integer is a whole number. So be careful with this. This is not going to round it to the closest whole number. It's always going to truncate it, as in round it down. So if we had 5 books and 2 students, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, but the answer stored in here isn't going to be rounded up to 3, it's going to be 2, and we'll test that later because we're doing integer division. Right, left over, so a whole number is the number of books, and then mod, same operator, which means the remainder left over after you do your division. So in our example before, we did number of books, which we said 5, divided by number of students, which we said 2. So 2 goes into 5 2 times with 1 left over, and that 1 is going to be stored here. All right, so print is going to be console.writeLine. But be careful, in Python you can concatenate with a comma. Can't do that in C#. You have to concatenate, which means join, with the plus. But in Python we would have got an error message at this point because you'd have to convert that integer value to a string before you could display it. We don't need to do that here. If you're concatenating, joining stuff together, you can do that conversion implicitly rather than explicitly. So let's just copy this. I'm pressing Control, Shift, and Right to select a word to the right of where the cursor is. And again, we need to remember to concatenate with a plus. And then finally, it's just press Enter to exit the program. The \n means put a new line into the program. So let's display that first. Console.write line. And the reason we have this is that we want to be able to see the program at the end. We want to see the program output. If we run it now, we probably won't see the program output. It'll just display and then disappear too quickly. So we'll put console.readline. Some of you have asked in lessons what the difference is between writeLine and write. It's only that writeLine puts an additional new line constant on the end. So sometimes it's helpful to not put that new line constant in. So here it said enter a number of students, and then on the same line we can type in a number. So 5 students. Enter number of books, let's have 10. So we should have 2 books each with none left over. That's good. Let's try again. Enter number of students, let's go 2. And then let's have 5 books. And here we have 2 books, so 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. We don't round up to 3, we truncate, we round down because it's integer division with 1 left over. Fab. Okay, so if you were doing this, you would comment each section of code. Always try and leave paragraphs in your code, as in break it up to leave some white space between it, and then just describe the paragraph of code underneath. So break it up into logical sections. Ask how many books, and then describe each section. So work out how many books and how many are left over, and then display the results to the screen. I'll let you put your own comments in, but hopefully this has been helpful. If you get stuck, just make use of the errors in the program, or just debug it. Press F5 and you can step through your lines of code one by one. So you put a breakpoint in if you click in the gutter, press F5 to debug, and as soon as it gets to that line of code, you can just run one line of code at a time. I'm pressing F10. So let's see, 5 students, and it pauses the code. You can hover your mouse over any of the variables, watch and inspect all of the variables, run it line by line, and that way you can find out what's happening. So I hope it's been useful. Do request a video if there's something you want to go through, and all the very best as you're learning. Experience and confidence comes with practice and time, so you can't get there instantly. Don't worry if it's frustrating to begin with, but thanks for all of your hard work as you're getting to the point of building up that experience. All the very best. Bye-bye.